So when you think of the Nintendo 64, the heavy hitters immediately come to mind, like Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, but the system's library had a lot more to offer than that. At the time, the 3D platformer was just beginning as a genre, and Nintendo's newest console was the de facto home for 3D hopping and bopping. And while many of the 3D platformers followed the standard formula, there were a few that offered a twist. A Chameleon Twist, if you will. Yeah? Let's talk about Chameleon Twist for the Nintendo 64.
Chameleon Twist was developed by Japan System Supply and published by Sunsoft for the Nintendo 64 in 1997. Now, before I go any further, doesn't seeing the Sunsoft logo just make you feel good inside? Man, I really miss all these old companies. When you start the game, you get your choice of Chameleon: Linda, Davy, Jack, or Fred. Really, there's no difference between them, but you have to choose Fred. Just look at him. The story begins with your chameleon crossing paths with a top hat wearing rabbit who enjoys copyright infringement, diving into a magic portal. The chameleon dives in after him to discover he has a new humanoid form in this strange land, and must use his new abilities to follow the rabbit through 6 stages to find the way home. Since you're playing as a chameleon, you naturally make use of the chameleon's most regarded ability. No, not color changing, you can't do that. So it's their second most well-known ability, their long, sticky tongues. Gameplay in Chameleon Twist is entirely centered around tongue lashing. You'll use your tongue to eat enemies, props to my boy Yoshi, grab onto distant poles to cross gaps, and even to vault yourself to new heights. It definitely helps the game stand out against the traditional hop and bop formula, especially since it's handled so well. The implementation is very natural and never feels forced. It feels like the levels were designed around the abilities from the start. As each level is broken up into individual rooms, it's all very manageable. You walk into a room and be able to deduce pretty quickly what's required of you and move on. It also keeps you from getting lost, which helps the game move at an enjoyable pace and never really feeling bogged down.
So the big difference between 2D and 3D platformers is the skill requirements. 2D platformers typically rely on twitchy reflexes and things that can't be replicated in a 3D space because you're losing a lot of that precision when you're jumping. Chameleon Twist makes up for that by building its obstacles around its mechanics, which creates a very enjoyable challenge.
For example, grabbing onto a distant pole with your tongue and then holding the A button will swing you around rather than pulling you directly across. There's a lot you need to keep in mind here. Hitting an enemy or wall will drop your hold on the pole, which is dangerous when you're above a bottomless pit. Your tongue is able to be curved in midair, so it's all about setting yourself up in a good position to get yourself where you need to be. The game contains 6 stages, which gives you enough to do without the game feeling like it's dragging or overstaying its welcome. The only collectible are crowns. Collecting 20 crowns in each stage unlocks Boss World, which is essentially boss rush mode. Collecting 50 crowns unlocks a hidden pool minigame tucked away in Ghost Castle. Overall, the game isn't terribly difficult, although some of the bosses can get pretty challenging. The Ant Queen boss in particular gave me quite a bit of trouble. You'll need to position yourself correctly as you spin around the pole, as taking her down requires you to both slurp up enemies and trip her in one sweep. It can get frustrating, but as with plenty of older games, all it takes is some practice. The game's music sets the tone with charming and upbeat ditties that fit the game's candy-colored world, and while none of them are particularly memorable, they're still quite enjoyable. While the Nintendo 64's graphics have aged about as gracefully as milk, Chameleon Twist still remains a pretty attractive game, with its imaginative art style and liberal use of color far outshining the fuzz and blur that characterizes so many games on the console. The sound effects are great too. I can't get enough of the sound it makes when your tongue is fully extended.
Chameleon Twist is a decent platformer that unfortunately got lost in the shadow of Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. The new mechanics that it brings to the table are a lot of fun to play with, and it gives the game a unique identity all its own. It's easy to find for under $10, a little bit more in the box, so it's definitely worth a look.
If you're a Nintendo 64 fan, and who isn't, then Chameleon Twist should definitely be on your radar. It's simple and short, but it does everything right and will definitely bring a smile to your face while you play. They certainly don't make them like this anymore.